Hi, I'm Dr. Julin Tong. Today I've posted an article on my blog on class bias in media. We are all too familiar with demand-driven bias and supply-driven bias in media. Demand-driven bias is basically the media wants to attract, retain, and animate a certain audience group. This is their base, and so they try to take on a biased view to basically more effectively attract, retain, and animate their audience, their target group. Supply driven bias is basically when after all, media does not make money from their audiences. The audiences, in a way, are actually the product. The money is made from advertising, and so the advertisers tend to prefer, perhaps for commercial reasons, perhaps for political reasons, or perhaps for social reasons. They want to have sometimes take certain views taken. And at the same time, there are also certain advertisers who have certain target audiences. And in order to target these advertisers, you need to target this certain types of view. So this is a little so the demand and supply driven biases, the two are always connected. They are never separated. Now, one thing that I point to in this article is something that is different. This is class-driven bias. It's a class bias. It is more classic, it's traditional bias. But I think it's something that has that not everyone is paying attention to. And I think it is quite important, especially in liberal media. Let me explain. What is class bias in media? Class bias is basically, let me give an example. In recent years, people have become more familiar with the privileges that social media influencers enjoy. They get a lot of perks. They get the ability to persuade larger audiences to act in certain ways, make a purchase, or to think, or think in one way, or maybe for some political action. There are a lot of different ways this privilege, this power can manifest. Now, imagine having not just a few hundred thousand subscribers on YouTube or Instagram. Imagine having the access to millions in a country, or maybe to tens of millions, hundreds of millions across countries in some international media. The traditional media platforms tend to confer very high power to key journalists, and those guys, they just simply by having that power, they become gradually attuned to a view that is not necessarily the same as the public who lack this power view how the reality is, or how they view different issues. Right. Another thing is that I gave an example in this article, which is related to the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation. They are a very interesting exception to demand and supply biases. They are publicly funded. They don't rely on advertising, so that in theory there is no supply side bias, and because they have really the majority of the news media market in the UK, they also have, in theory, shouldn't have a demand side bias. But the reporters can still be biased simply because they have a lot of power on the personal level and because they are personally associated with key political figures, and they all tend to be in the same party, in the same group, sharing the same views, right? So there is going to be some subconscious and conscious choices that basically continue to influence them, and this can manifest beyond that, right? So even if a journalist does not have this very strong connection, like on the personal level, with certain groups, just simply by socializing with these groups frequently, if, for example, you are a journalist and you report on stocks, and you associate with socialize with the stockbrokers all the time, or if you report on business ventures and you associate with venture capitalists all the time, this social experience, your social experience could actually affect how you view things. And this may, again, not necessarily be the same as how the public views things, right? And another thing is, ultimately, there is also a feedback mechanism. Basically, supposedly there's a junior journalist who is rebellious, who does not conform to the views of the organization, who disagrees with the senior editor. We can probably foresee that this junior journalist is unlikely to progress in the organization, and is likely to lose access, right? So, and this becomes a feedback reinforcing mechanism, so that people who reach senior positions tend to have certain views. And by the way, this is not unique to journalism and media. This is the same for organizations, all type of organizations. And I will talk about this I think discuss this in future articles and videos, because it's also something that interests me. So that's class bias in media. And why is it so important, so remarkable in liberal media? I think this is because a lot of times people have confused the liberal media with progressiveness, right? With progressive views, with equality, etc. But really, liberal media, all liberal means is the liberalization of business. It's it's basically a new liberal strain of thought. At least in recent decades, they have taken the form of neoliberalism. Basically, a globalization, sometimes even racing to the bottom, and more internationalization, and more money, making money, right? So they are not necessarily the same. But I will discuss this in detail in another video, and another article too. But what I want to point out is that in liberal media, people, those anchors, those journalists, are at the same time also affected by class bias. And why is this an important point? Because okay, in financial media, in conservative media, you expect people to be rich, people to represent certain voices, but indeed in liberal media, the powerful journalists still take home hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of dollars or euros or pounds or whatever currency that is there in their respective country, and they have immense power, so that they belong to a different social class than the majority of the public, and so it is natural for them to have views that represent this fact. And just simply because the public tend to think mistakenly that the liberal media reflects their own views, this can have some bad effects in how people perceive what other people share, who share their own socio-economic situation, circumstances, would think, or maybe they think they themselves are outliers and the social media right. So that's something that is quite important. And one last thing that I want to point out is that the effect of class bias can actually compound and work with demand and supply, traditional basically media biases, and can produce some very interesting effects. I think it's because the journalists having powerful positions don't think they have different social experience than the public, than us. So they can think and act in different ways. They can have difficulty connecting with us. Well, they think that they are right. They think they're representing the public. So that's, I think, an explanation of why sometimes, not a lot of time, but sometimes some journalists are not making sense. They're saying things that they're so confident are appealing, but to most people, these things just don't make sense. I think the reason is not because they're dumb. These have got to be smart people. They do that because their social experience is different, because of class bias, and this will work together with traditional biases in media, can make their points difficult to understand and sometimes incomprehensible to the majority of the public. All right, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching. And I will put the link to the original article in the description below. Please visit my blog as much as as much as you like. And if you like this video, give it a like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and have a great day.